right now.
Think about the children. Think about the children.
You must, you must, you must.
Think about the children.
You must, you must, you must.
Think about the children. Think about the children.
7:31 coming around towards 7:32 in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, the cannabis market will be the focus of attention on when tomorrow CanEx Jamaica Business Conference and Expo gets underway. It runs until Saturday, which is the 17th. It's the fifth such conference and the first following a two-year hiatus due to the pandemic. Organizers are boasting of increased participation from across the region. And to tell us more, we're joined by the founder of CanEx, Douglas Gordon. We are having some technical challenges doing our link just a short while ago. Let's see if he's there with us. Mr. Gordon, are you there with us, please?
I am indeed.
Good morning. Good to have you with us, sir. What can you tell us about the CanEx Jamaica Business Conference and Expo, which starts tomorrow?
Well, CanEx is a platform that brings investors, operators, cultivators, doctors, scientists together to talk about the cannabis industry and to forge relationships and networking that can build a dynamic and thriving industry throughout the Caribbean. So this is going to be the fifth time that we've held it here in Montego Bay since we started in 2016.
And as far as the expo itself and the conference, what are you hoping to achieve? We've just come out of a pandemic. It's been a bit of a hiatus, as we mentioned, for many people. In fact, most people right around the world have had their plans and their projections disrupted. What's the focus of the event this year?
I think the key overarching goal for us is to get the industry together. You know, cannabis is a new industry. It's a startup industry. And you have a number of startup entities in that industry. You know, when you put those two things together, that's a very challenging environment. And what's happened in Jamaica is you've had different elements working independently. You've had licensed producers, you've had the traditional farmers, you've had the regulators, and they've all worked independently. And what we want to establish, what we want to accomplish this year is really, first of all, getting people together again, you know, with the two-year hiatus, as you mentioned. But secondly, with a renewed focus on identifying the key challenges, opportunities, and working synergistically so we can accomplish them. This is a massive industry that has tremendous health and economic implications for the Caribbean, unlike anything that's really preceding it. And it's important that we understand these things so we can advance properly.
And Mr. Gordon, just so we can understand it before we continue our discussion for a few minutes still, the event gets underway tomorrow. Is it an in-person event? Is it too late for people who might want to follow the discussion online, virtually? Is there any room for that?
No, it's an in-person event. You know, one of the things that we found to be a real point of differentiation for CanEx was bringing people together. And the energy that we get by people being in one environment, being able to dynamically interact with each other. And that's an important thing when it comes to this industry, in our opinion. So bringing folks to Jamaica, bringing people out of Jamaica, bringing people, you know, in an environment where we're talking about how we grow this industry, how we navigate some of these challenges, that's most efficiently done, in my opinion, face-to-face. You know, we've had a separate web element for this particular conference now.
I hear you on that, and I don't think you'll find any disagreement there, because there seems to be a much better synergy when they're in-person discussions in that regard. But just ahead of the event getting underway, what has been your experience as far as what we often refer to as the stigma associated with cannabis, with marijuana, with all of the inherent issues that we've inherited over many generations with legislation and so on that is being changed at different levels in our Caribbean region? Is that stigma, that attitude towards cannabis or marijuana in a negative sense, is that still very strong?
It's something that has not been tackled the way that it should have. And, you know, it's important that people hear and understand that prohibition commenced 70 years ago, right? Prior to that, cannabis was on what's called the American Pharmacopoeia. That means the medical association classified as a recommended treatment for different health ailments. Cannabis became prohibited because of the concern that the group of businessmen had around their textile industry and what hemp could poses a threat to it. So it wasn't done because of a lack of medical benefits. It wasn't done because it was unsafe. It was done to further specific commercial interests. And over time, that narrative has simply been built upon, until we ended up with the war on drugs, which we've all now come to the realization was a war on people. So that being said, what we still have to do as an industry is we have to, one, tell that story with backed up evidence, right? To understand the genesis of this. Number two is we have to lay out with empirical data in a very clear fashion the benefits that will derive to the population from cannabis. Cannabis is going to improve quality of life. Cannabis is going to reduce healthcare expense, and cannabis is going to allow people to have real healthcare access, not this wait in lines for hours and hours kind of free healthcare that we offer in different parts of the Caribbean. But more than that, cannabis will be an economic driver because we have CARICOM, 10 million people and 60 million tourists. You have a globe that understands cannabis, that consumes cannabis. And while it's not legal in all jurisdictions, it's being legalized at a very, very fast rate globally. And the Caribbean has a special place and heart, if you will, in that global market that we can do things collectively that come back into our populations. So yes, there's still a stigma. Two, we need to put the data in front of the population so they understand the benefits. And three, we need to communicate that effectively and consistently. When we do that, I think people will find that the perceived notions they had about cannabis are incorrect, and they will embrace the positive benefits of it wholeheartedly.
And before we conclude our discussion, Mr. Gordon, we thank you very much for taking the time to be with us ahead of the 5th Annual CanEx Jamaica Business Conference and Expo. You can go onto their website, canexjamaica.com, for more information. Starts tomorrow, concludes on Saturday at Montego Bay in Jamaica. What would you like to say finally before we conclude our discussion this morning? Certainly.
I think it's important that we understand that this is a massive opportunity for the Caribbean to change our economic outcomes, and it's our inherent responsibility to do a little bit of research and reading to understand this. Cannabis was a $17 billion industry just for canna tourism last year in the United States. You can Google Forbes and they'll show you. This is something that's skewed to be a $200-300 billion industry over the next 5 to 10 years. And we're doing our part to try to put that in front of people. And we're also even producing a documentary that will go into Netflix to tell this story. So it's important as a population we self-educate.
Douglas Gordon, we thank you very much indeed, sir, for taking the time to be with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome. CanEx Jamaica, as we said, gets underway tomorrow, and it's going to be running all the way until Saturday. We take a break, 7:39 in Trinidad and Tobago. We'll be back right after this.
Girl, you got me gazing, caught up in your amazing. Now I only want you. Start to wine is high time, girl, walk that